And I have the pleasure of actually introducing our keynote speaker. His name is Rameck Hunt. And a little over 10 years ago, I remember Rameck Hunt on Oprah. He had this appearance on Oprah, and he was there with two of his childhood friends, and they told this really inspirational story of a pact that they made when they were young to become doctors, and that they would support one another in those goals. And so from that point, I actually really wanted to meet Rameck and his friends. And actually, and I heard that he was going to speak in New Jersey somewhere, and I rarely cross the bridge to New Jersey. And nothing against people from New Jersey, but it was a big deal for me to cross the bridge and go to New Jersey to listen to hear Rameck. So I did that, and as life would have it, within the first 5 minutes of us sitting down and meeting one another, we learned that we shared a really close friend, and that I could have met Rameck like decades before he was even on Oprah. So that was actually kind of funny. But today, Dr. Hunt is a board-certified internist at University Medical Center of Princeton, and he's an assistant professor of medicine at Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. His friend, who he made a pact with, Dr. Jenkins, fulfilled his dream of becoming a dentist, and he serves, let me get this right, he serves as assistant professor of clinical dentistry at Columbia University. And his other friend he made a pact with, Dr. Davis, is a board-certified emergency medicine physician at St. Michael's Medical Center in Newark. The doctors created the Three Doctors Foundation, which focuses on motivating young people to achieve their dreams. His story is really about agency in young people and the importance of a few well-placed adults along the way. Please welcome Rameck Hunt to the podium. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Lisa. It is interesting how, like, it's a small world, so you got to be careful what you say about people because you never know. Let me just make sure you guys can hear me in the back. My name is Rameck Hunt. As Lisa said, I'm a board-certified internist and assistant professor of medicine at now Rutgers, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and me and my friends wrote a couple of books, and we started a foundation, and we travel the country a lot to tell our story and tell our message, because I'm an expert in diabetes management, hypertension management, heart failure management. I don't profess to be an expert in grit and resilience. However, I lived it, and so I can tell you my experience and what I've gone through. And from that vantage point, I can give you my own expertise on grit and resilience. Because we had to have a lot of it. But as I sat and thought about what I wanted to say today, it actually isn't to start with grit and resilience. The one thing I always like to say about growing up where I grew up is that the only difference between me and some of my friends is that the three of us, me, Sam, and George, we actually bought into the idea that education could save our lives. And that was really the only difference between me and some of my friends when we were younger. Because as an internist, I always think about the question, like, why did something happen? And so when I think about what happened to some of my friends who did not make it and why they didn't make it, I think back to the first grade. And when the teacher would ask, you know, what you want to be when you grow up, everybody's hand would go up. I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a this or a that. And if you fast forward that to 7th, 8th grade and you ask that very same question, not many hands go up. A lot of these kids are just, I'm just trying to make it. And so along the way, somewhere, these kids lost hope. And I know it because I began to lose hope. Because when I was in the first grade, I didn't realize that I was poor. Like, I didn't realize that I had to keep moving around from place to place because we kept getting evicted from wherever we lived because my mother had a drug problem. I didn't realize that that meant that I was poor. I didn't realize sharing the bed with my cousins and my grandmother's house meant that I was poor. I didn't realize that when I visited my dad in jail, so much that I thought that that's basically where he lived, that was his home, that meant a lot of different things about where I was growing up. Until I got older, and then I started to realize that my box that I lived in, I really knew what the word blighted community meant, because that's the box that I grew up in, and that's what I saw, and that's what I experienced. And a lot of times when you have kids and you ask kids to think outside of their box, they have to take a leap of faith to do that. They actually have to have some hope and some aspirations that they can actually do that. But most of these kids, in fact, from a medical perspective, if you ask someone to see something that's actually not there or hear something that's not there, you are by definition asking them to be crazy. You're asking them to be schizophrenic. You're asking them to see and hear things that don't exist in their confines. And so these kids we need to figure out some way because some kids, I happen to be maybe one of those dreamers, I might have been a little schizophrenic kid, that I actually was able to think outside of that box, but not everybody will think or behave or believe that way. In my opinion, the way to get these kids to think outside of their box is to either physically pick them up and take them outside of their box so they can actually see and hear other things, or bring somebody inside of their box so they can actually see or hear different things. Now, you got to be careful who you bring inside their box, because they may not, listen to them, or it may not be meaningful to them. So that's the reason why we come inside a lot of people's boxes, because we want these kids to see us, hear us, know us, and experience us, and then they know that they can actually achieve and dream, and they have something that they can attach their dream to, because guess what? I lived right upstairs from you. Guess what? Your parents were on drugs, so were mine. Guess what? You got arrested when you were a teenager, so did I. I got arrested for attempted murder when I was a teenager. I grew up in a single-parent home. Both of my parents were on drugs. My other doctor friend, he got arrested for armed robbery when he was a teenager. So all of these things, to be honest, we should not be here today. We are outliers because we should not be here. Based off of all the things that happened to us when we were kids, we should not be here. And so the question is, how did we get here then? So, we had a lot of luck, a lot of help. But the truth is that it was our pact. And I think, and I know, at least for us, and I think for other people, that our pact in designing pacts around the country, particularly in places where you can't change their situation. You can't say, okay, Shazam, we're going to make two parents, a couple of siblings, a dog, and a white picket fence. You can't change those things. You can't change the things that they're going to do and walk throughout the city. You can't change it. But for us, when we developed our pact, it developed like a force field around us. And as we move forward in our journey to become doctors, a lot of things bounced off of our force field. And the things that we did not have, that they weren't given to us because nobody was really paying attention to us. We were just going along with this pact that we made in high school, and then we attached a goal to that pact, and then we had some sort of direction. But nobody was really paying us attention, except a few people that hey, that seems odd what these guys are doing. And then some people would chip in and help us out. But nobody was really paying a whole lot of attention. And we had to find a way to survive, which then started the grit for us to make it to where we wanted to go. Because we didn't have fathers in the home, so we became each other fathers. We taught each other how to become men. We didn't have money, so we helped one another out as far as, making sure we were okay to get a book for school or for this or for that. We were rough around the edges. And so in our pact, in our positive peer pressure network, it wasn't cool to be goofing off anymore. See, in my other networks, it was okay to do that. But in this network, it wasn't. And in fact, it was an unsaid thing for us because we didn't have to say anything. George talks a lot about when we were in school, in college, we were studying, we were biology majors, so we did a lot of studying. And, but George would tell you he had the least stamina in studying. And me and Sam we were roommates, and then George he was our suite mate, so he was in the room behind us. And so when his stamina would go, he would get like, he said he would read the book and it seemed like the book would say, okay, you read enough of me, you could close me and go to the party. So he would close the book and go to the party, but he had to pass our room before he got out of the suite. And he would see us studying like our lives depended on it. And he knew his stamina wasn't as good as ours. And that, in and of itself, because we didn't even see him because we were like in the books, that in and of itself made him turn around and go back to his room and crack those books back open. It was things like that that helped us along. And because you can't be everywhere for every kid. And so wouldn't it be nice if you could develop a formula that they can actually self-check themselves? And so that's why I think our pact is important, because we were self-checking ourselves as we were going along because we weren't the greatest kids. We got in trouble. We did things that we shouldn't have done. In fact, I think what the pact really did for us, instead of, if the grid is over here, and I'm gonna call this the anti-grid, the black hole, the things that people are, where you're hopeless and you don't want to do much. It prevented us from falling into that black hole of the anti-grid. That's how it started, because if we hadn't first started there, we wouldn't have even been thinking about grit. That concept, it just wouldn't have occurred to us. The first thing that it made us do is we didn't want to go back home and be in our mother's basements and not have anything to show for it. And so we had to stop goofing off. We had to stop, and so we had to shed all of that first. We had to start paying attention before we could even start focusing. And all of that took a lot of time to mature into what we wanted, what we wanted to be and what we wanted to become. And we didn't, and again, it wasn't like this was planned, like, okay, first step is, to resist the anti-grit. Second step is to, build up your grit. It clearly wasn't that methodical, but we realized that we had something special that we did not have at home, that we did not have in our communities. But we had it in each other. And so it was this force field. And I submit to you that a pact of three is probably the best way to do it. And the reason is because if you have any more, it can splinter, because you can have 2 and 5 or 2 and 2. But if you have a pact of three, if two people going this way, it's going to gravitate that other person there. And I think that's what happened to us, because as we were going through and as this thing became real, because in high school when we made this pact, it wasn't really real. It was, we were cutting class. And there happened to be a seminar ongoing about careers in medicine and dentistry. And so as we were cutting class, the security guards saw us, and so we dodged into the library so we wouldn't get caught. And this recruiter was talking about careers in medicine and dentistry, and as I'm sitting in the back of the room, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I could do that. And like the first time I ever even thought about becoming a doctor. And George wanted to be a dentist because he had gotten braces on his teeth, and it was a thought in the back of his mind, because he was from Newark and he lived on Prince Street, and Prince Street was one of the worst. That's where we got Brick City from, because the Prince Street projects were just a bunch of projects. And so, it sounded good when he was getting his teeth fixed, but then that thought process went away, because George wasn't schizophrenic, or he didn't hallucinate too much, so he just left that alone. But then it came back to him. Those voices and hallucinations and those visions came back when that recruiter started to talk about careers in medicine and dentistry. And so when we were done with that recruiter session, he was like, we should do this together. And that's how our pact started. Now, I was thinking about going to Howard University with 2 other friends that were also my 2 other best friends. That's a separate group that I was in. And it sounded just more appealing to go to Howard. I was like, I can go party. I'm gonna have a great time down there. But it was something about that recruiter, and then it was something about the realness, and also I couldn't afford the application fee for Howard. So it was something about a lot of that stuff that made me stay in New Jersey and go to Seton Hall University. And it really started that kind of like haphazardly. And we went and we had a recruiter named Carla Dixon, and she started a new program for BA, MD students in New Jersey, and they had to pick 10 students throughout the state of New Jersey. And you could pick one from Newark and one from here, but you had to go throughout the state. So when she interviewed us, she basically was like, I can't take one without taking the other 2. Now, you knew her bosses were not going to hear that, because you can't take 3, not only from the same city, but from the same school. And she said, well, if I can't take any of them then. And she made a big case for us, and she took all 3 of us. And so we were 3 of those 10 students. And it was just the things that she said to us, and then, again, our pact coming together that allowed us to continue going forward. And so I think if it wasn't for our pact, and if it wasn't for Carla, actually, because Carla was really instrumental in helping us get through college, because it was tough. And then we started to kind of, spread our own wings and go on our own. And there were times that we couldn't afford the college that we went to, and I didn't realize at the time that you would get kicked out of college if you didn't pay your tuition. I thought that if you did good, that you should be good. And so, but I couldn't register the second semester. And I'm like, why can't we register? And so we're all trying, and somebody told us, well, you have a $20,000 bill. So I'm like, well, so we go, and I'll never forget Mr. McGovern. So we go to the bursar's office and go and one by one go talk to Mr. McGovern, and we like, we can't register, and we need to register. We're biology majors. If we don't register now, all the good classes are going to be taken up. And he was like, well, you owe me $20,000. And so I was like, I don't have $20,000. You know that. And so he was like, well, I don't. I'm like, but I get good grades. And I was so passionate about my argument that he was like, clearly that doesn't matter as much. But so he said, okay, you owe $20,000 this semester, $20,000 next semester. Okay, we'll put you on a payment plan. So I was working on the Turnpike at the time. All 3 of us were, actually. So I did have a little bit of money. So he said, well, how much could you pay a month? So I was like, $25? And he was like, okay, I'm going to release your hold. You better go get your classes in the next 2 hours. And he obviously did not have to do that. And he did that for all 3 of us. And so then we get a little cocky, because things are starting to happen for us that shouldn't happen for us, but we believed. And so we started to really have a lot of hope that we were going to do this doctor thing. And so we started to go to heights that we didn't even know we had in us. And our positive peer pressure network it allowed us to soar. And the reason I say that, and that's key, is because the reverse is also the truth. I have friends who are in jail now for murder, doing something that I couldn't fathom, or they couldn't even fathom that they would have ever been able to do, but their pact, their network was not a positive one. And so it can go both ways, but as you guys know, a pact, a positive peer pressure, or a peer pressure network in general is powerful. And so if you could design something to make it work in that way, you can make these kids soar, because it made us soar, so that we were off to the races, and it was time for medical school, and our biggest nightmare would have been two of us walking across that stage and having to see your third friend sitting in the audience. We were not going to let that happen. And you also wouldn't want to be the one sitting in the audience cheering on your two friends. You were not. So we helped one another, because if I was good at math and wasn't good at English, George got me on that one, and vice versa. So we helped each other, and it was a positive competition. It was a friendly competition, if you will, that the goal was for all three of us to cross that stage. And so that's what happened. And so when we finished, we just was like, this to us, this was like we need to shout this off the top of a mountaintop, because we realized as we looked back that our friendship saved our lives. And it could have saved so many other kids' lives had they had a friendship like we had. Had they made a pact, had they also, a key important thing for us was that our insecurities, we kind of left those at the door. Our egos, we left those at the door. We told each other things that we probably didn't even tell our families, because they couldn't understand a lot of things anyway, because they weren't going through. We were the first people in our families to go to college. So just a lot of different things that we had a true friendship and a true bond that we still have 25, 30 years later. And so that's why we've been on this crusade and on this mission for the last 10 or 15 years since we've been out of medical school and writing our books and traveling in our foundation, because we really believe in what happened to us, that it can be duplicated, and that you can design this for other kids to do that. And it almost can help them. They can kind of be run on we can't really run on automatic pilot, but the times that you can't be there, they're going to be able to police themselves. Because when you're walking through the hood, there are a lot of temptations. There are a lot of things that are going to happen that are going to tempt you. There are things that make your reality like, I can't do this. Like you convince yourself. Like one of the students, she got pregnant. So she convinced herself that there was no way that she could become a doctor because she had a daughter, or was going to have a daughter. Or another student who had money issues. And for me, if I didn't have my friends, my mother's drug addiction was so bad that my little sister, who was 3 years old at the time, I decided that I was going to go and just not finish this because I needed to take care of my little sister because nobody else was. And my grandmother said to me, you can't help your sister until you help yourself. And so, but it was hard for an 18, 19-year-old boy to understand that, like, this is my little sister. By the time I'm done with medical school, she's going to be grown almost. So what do I do? And she a big believer in God. She said, just trust in God and do what you can, but you can't help your family at all if you don't help yourself first. But these are the things that these kids are facing. And so it would have been easy for me to say, no, my grandmother, no, I got to do this. But I also had my friends there that I wanted to complete this pact with them. And so it's things like that you might not be able to convince a young person that they need to sit down and focus and be gritty and put that 4 hours in that they need to put in order to get to that goal. But we were able to do that because of our construct, what happened to us. And I think for me, talking to these kids, we first want to focus on them not falling into that abyss, and then work our way this way, because it's the same, but it's not, because it's a bit of a different approach. It's like when I'm talking to somebody about end-of-life issues, and I ask them what are their wishes, and do they want to be a DNR, or do not resuscitate, or do they want to be a full code, go all out? And you have somebody who comes in who's healthy, and they say, well, I don't want all these tubes in me. No, doc. And I tell my residents all the time, don't just put DNR unless you really fully explain it to them. Because you come in the thing and you say, well, I don't want tubes, I don't want to be on a breathing machine. You give them this scenario. So, okay, so you're healthy. You come in, let's say you have a whopping pneumonia on both of your lungs, and you can't breathe, and you need to be put on a breathing machine. And if I put you on a breathing machine and then give you IV antibiotics and then clear up the pneumonia and then take the tube out, you'll be fine. Of course I want that. But my residents would have put DNR on that person. They'd have came in whopping pneumonia, and they said they didn't want a breathing machine. So it's the nuance of how you look at things and how you approach it. And the way we look at it with these young kids is we want to first get rid of their hopelessness and despair, because we believe that you have to start there. These kids have to have some belief. They have to have some hope before they can even focus on whatever that goal is that's at the end of the road. They have to have hope and belief that they can actually do it, because when we first started, we didn't have that hope and belief. It came over time. But then once we got that hope and belief, we became so gritty. I mean, you weren't going to stop us no matter what happened. But we had to get that hope and the belief back in these kids and into ourselves, and that's what we try to do to these kids, get the hope and belief back into them, because they don't have it, because they're in that box, and in their box is what they see. And the things that are real to them that may or may not be real to you, it's real to them, because it was real to me. The only thing I thought I could do when I was growing up was to work at the post office. Why? Because about 6 or 7 of my immediate family worked at the post office. Plus I had to hook up there because 6 or 7 of them worked there. So that was my goal. That was making it to me. I didn't think about being no doctor. Like that, what is that? Because that was my reality. And again, to expect that everyone, you're going to be able to convince them to dream and see something that's asking them to be crazy. That's a lot to ask for. Not saying that you shouldn't, because you should, but you have to, if you think about it like that, that's a lot to ask for. And you ask people to dream, and they don't have any hope, and they're not making an action. As they say, dreaming without action is just sleep. Like they're not gonna do anything. And so I think it's important to start with the hope and make them believe, but you have to give them a tangible thing to hope and believe for. And that's why we shared our story, because I'm in here, when we wrote our book, when we were graduating medical school and we were on our way to residency, we were writing our book, and we weren't even doctors yet on our own. We were just finishing up our training, and the editor was saying, okay, give us some more. And so we're writing, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to tell them this, because I'm not even a doctor yet. Like, no one's going to come in my door. And so we sat amongst ourselves and talked about what we wanted to share with the world, because it could impact on our jobs, our livelihoods, and it also, who knows how people would take the message that we were trying to give. But we talked about it, we prayed on it, and we gave everything. And we told the good, the bad, and the ugly. And thank goodness it was received the way we wanted it to be received. But it was tough to give that information, because we weren't proud of it. We weren't proud of the things that we had done. And how can you, I'm thinking to myself going on these interviews, how am I going to explain, so you're a doctor, but you were charged with attempted murder? How does that work? And I don't have time to talk to you, but I really didn't try to kill anybody, just so you know. But that's all, that's a whole, you can read the book, but but I just want to thank you guys for having me today. If there are any, I don't know if there's time for questions, but I just hope that something that again, I'm not an expert on grit and resilience, but I am an expert on my life and what I did and what we went through. And I think our formula is what saved our lives. Thank you.